go over some of the guidelines. Again, I started the meeting this evening that the Mayor Kuhn is on his way. He should be here shortly. But we do have some guidelines we want to stay with. The public may speak only during the meeting's public comment period, and at any other time the majority of the board allows. Speakers must be recognized by the presiding officer. Speakers must step in front of the room. Speakers must give their names, addresses, and organizations, if any. Speakers must limit their remarks to 5 minutes on any given topic. Speakers may not yield any remaining time they may have to another speaker. Board members may, with the permission of the mayor, interrupt the speaker during their remarks, but only for the purpose of clarification or information. All remarks must be addressed to the board as a body, and not to individual board members. Speakers must observe the community accepted rules of courtesy, decorum, dignity, and good taste. Interested parties and representatives may also address the board by written communications. We do have some written communications that were sent to us. Again, everyone that signed in has the opportunity to speak. Trustee Hawkins will mention those names and say if you want to speak. If you didn't get a chance to sign in, you'll have the opportunity at the end to address yourselves.
Carolyn Bushon of 24 Parrot Street.
No, I'm not making any comment.
Oh, this was just signing in.
Yeah, I'm signing in.
You're here. Okay, great. Kathy Toman. Catherine Square. Did you want to make?
Not at the moment, but I'd like to reserve my right to speak later if time permits.
Mike Turton. Did people just sign in because there was this list here?
We were told to sign in.
Okay.
We followed rules.
Well, we have 51 of you signed in. So I'm just going to go through the list. You'll tell me. Linda Lang.
Yes, I'd like to read a statement prepared by someone else who could not be here, who is a resident and registered voter in Cold Spring. So I'm Linda Lang. I'm a resident. Do you want to just stand?
You know, maybe you should go to the front because the
Sure.
Just want to make sure everybody can hear everything.
Sure. My name is Linda Lang, and I'm a resident and a registered voter of Cold Spring, and I'm reading a statement that was prepared by Gretchen Dykstra, who is also a resident and registered voter of this community. Just bear with me, this was prepared prior to the 3D model that you see, so there is comment about a request for a 3D, so please bear with me.
Excuse me, can you just speak up? There's some people.
Can't hear me? Really?
Yeah, because
I
the
thought it was pretty
acoustics
loud.
are really bad in here for a music room. You should
Okay.
like really raise your voice.
I will.
Like, belt out.
Okay. Dear Cold Spring Board of Trustees, Cold Spring Planning Board, I will not be in Cold Spring on Tuesday, April 29th, 2014. Otherwise, I would attend the public hearing. I am in favor of development at the site, but urge the board to be careful, particularly about the scale of this project. My interest is threefold: to ensure a charming gateway into Cold Spring that addresses practical needs, produces long-term revenues for the village, and maintains trees and green space. Charming is, of course, a matter of taste, and I, for one, do not necessarily mean a reproduction of 19th century architecture. I would support good modern design that alludes to our architectural history. Too much of anything becomes boring and precious, in my opinion. However, I believe it is irresponsible of any elected or appointed official in Cold Spring to approve the rezoning or the ultimate site plan without seeing a three-dimensional scale model. I am amazed that with all the time and all the discussion the village board has yet to say to the developer, enough, there will be no progress until we see your proposal in context. A senior center and municipal space are both important, and I would support their inclusion. Beyond one large private gift, however, I am not aware of any guaranteed funds for the build-out, rent, and maintenance of those uses. What happens if those funds are not forthcoming and the anticipated municipal spaces stand vacant? Will the developer be able to rent to commercial tenants? I would urge the limit on commercial space be lifted with regard to vacant municipal spaces after a reasonable time. I have never been in favor of market rate senior housing, but my greatest fear is that 55 condominiums are too many, whoever lives in them, taking up too much space. Since we have not seen a 3D model, can any of us really visualize how big this development will be? The markers on the site only add to my fears. I understand the village board rejected the notion of some buildings having 3 stories in order to reduce the footprint. Why? There have long been attractive and appropriate 3-story buildings and houses along Main Street, 9D, and side streets such as Church and High Streets. I see several from my house alone. Permitting the increased height of a few buildings at Butterfield would increase the amount of green space. It goes without saying that the gorgeous copper beech tree deserves a glorious green stage. In summary, I would urge the trustees to 1, demand a 3-dimensional scale model or its electronic equivalent before your vote. 2, allow the planning board and the developer to rent to commercial tenants, perhaps with short-term leases, if funds for the build-out of municipal spaces are not forthcoming in a reasonable time frame. 3, increase the total amount of green space by allowing height flexibility. Sincerely, Gretchen Dykstra.
Thank you. Linda Ann Newman.
I was hoping to hear more comments before I got called. Also, please, is there not a microphone?
It's we're hoping it's forthcoming, but.
I'm,
You don't need one.
I don't need one, that's true. I was a college teacher to many. I'm concerned about the fact that these are all basically going to be high-end housing. I'm at Glassbury Court. We are very proud of the fact that the town board made the developer provide housing for some public servants at a reduced rate, so that there are units in our development that have been bought by fire persons, teachers, nurses, etc. And I think that that could be within the purview of the board to seriously consider that a proportion. And the contingent on that was that those houses could not then be resold except for very moderate increases. In other words, someone could not exploit the service they got. I am basically in favor of the housing because I'm very concerned that along with global change, climate change, we're facing a huge demographic change. That this country has not confronted the fact that within 10 years, we are just going to have an overwhelming number of seniors. And we have not built the infrastructure to take care of those persons. And now let me put in a plug for the Phillipstown Senior Club, who is having an AARP speaker come in and talk about the AARP concept of aging in place. And we'll have those dates pretty soon and we'll publicize those. Because we really want to begin to move the town and our villages into a place where people can feel that their community will support them as they grow older. Thank you.
Thank you. Erin Freimark.
Hello, I have very short remarks, but thank you for the opportunity for the public to speak. My remarks are very specific about the question of the zoning change that seems to have been felt required for this specific parcel of land. And I was curious if the board has put consideration into the idea of this being a spot zone, and if there were a possibility of a legal challenge to this zone based on being a spot zoning, if the board was prepared to defend that in court. It does seem to meet the 2 requirements of spot zone, which is it's zoning applied to a very limited geographic area, and that it is done without enough consideration of harmonizing with the comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Joy Albrecht. No comment. Patricia Gingulis,
No comment.
Michael Gingulis,
I just signed it. I'll hold my comments for later.
Barbara Scuchmara,
And just an update, the microphone is not coming because we don't have the podium to accommodate it, correct?
I'll try to speak loud. Can you hear me? This is short. I am your county legislator, and I hear complaints a lot from my constituents, which is fine. But do you want to know the 3 top complaints that I hear? Number 1, where is our senior center? Number 2, where is our post office going to go? Number 3, why don't we have county services on this side of the county? Guess what? All of these questions can be answered with this project. So let's get it going. We've gone through so many public hearings and so many sessions like this. I'm ready to move forward, and I hope you are too. Thank you.
Paul Henderson,
I have just 2 questions, quick questions, because I'm trying to get familiar with this project. Does the B4A zone currently exist anywhere else? And the other one is, can we compare the footprint of these buildings with the footprint, say, of Chestnut Ridge? Twice as much, half as much?
I think we answered the question at the end.
At the end, yes.
We'll answer it later. Thank you. Con Dunn,
I just signed in.
oh. John Falloon, the senior. Oh, no, he just signed in. Good there. Rich Franco,
I had a question. I know the planning board had some suggestions for the board to consider at that joint meeting relative to the zoning, and I was just wondering how the discussion with the board went and what changes were made to the original zoning plan.
thank you. Linda, do you have any of your own?
No.
Okay, thank you. R. Blanchard,
No comment.
Ransner, thank you for coming. Mary L. Washburn. All right, speak up.
My question is about the medical center. That will be used for like a nursing home? Will there be like a nursing home there?
At the Lahey Pavilion? Is that what you?
Yeah.
We'll answer.
What will the medical center be? What will that be? Same thing, right? I was wanting to know what will it be like.
Okay. Marilyn Schlosser.
No comment.
Arino Serratas.
I reserve my comment a little later, please.
Okay. Stephen Marshall.
I'm sure he'll have to.
Ann Impellizzeri.
Maybe I'll move this a little closer, maybe that'll help with the sound. I don't want to block you. I want to comment on one specific thing, but before I do, much has been made about the extensive public comment, and it really has been extensive and quite wonderful. With one reservation, namely the time at which many of us were quite enthusiastic about the concept that we're working on was indeed similar to what is shown there in green and red, although it didn't have the 3 single-family homes. And there really at that time were no dimensions shown until later. But with that comment, let me get to my specific point that I want to address. In view of the widespread interest in having as much green space, lawn, and trees as possible on the Butterfield site, I hope, and please note that I address this as a concerned and caring citizen and not as a member of the planning board, which I proudly serve, but I hope that the village board will reconsider the possibility that was in the draft, reviewed on April 10, but omitted in the version that is now before us. And that possibility would have permitted, but not require, a reduction in the footprint of some, not all of the buildings, with an increase in the permitted height up to 3 stories or 45 feet. And it's worth noting that the provision in the current zoning, which specifies a maximum of 2.5 stories or 35 feet, is there not to protect our traditional village, and has been noted there are significant number of 3-story buildings in the village of Cold Spring already, particularly in the 19th century traditional areas. But that those limitations, the height limitation, was put in as part of the suburban zoning, which was implemented here in the 60s. During the discussion of possible changes to B4A on April 10, Mr. Galero suggested that permitting changes in footprint and height on perhaps 50% of the buildings would be satisfactory, and his attorney suggested that a reduction in footprint of up to 10% could be acceptable, as opposed to the 25% reduction in the draft, but pointed out that they had not requested these changes, these provisions. So at this point, it impresses me that whether or not the developer actually wants this flexibility, this possibility, it could be very helpful to permit it in the zoning. It could possibly lead to more varied and interesting design as the developer refines the plans, or could lead to an opportunity for improvements during site plan review. So my question is, why not at least permit it in the zoning? Accordingly, what I hope is that the village board will reconsider and put in permission for up to 10% of reduction in the footprint with up to 3 stories or 45 feet in height on some, not more than 50% of the buildings, in order to increase the green space on the site. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. If anybody has prepared remarks, we'd like to take them and hold on to them. Tony Bardis?
Tony Bardis, village resident. As I wrote this down because I always screw up when I get in front of public. But as I understand, Mr. Galaro is going to be donating at least 1 acre of land, and it's going to have to be maintained and insured by the new owners of the Homeowners Association. It is my understanding that the village will be able to continue to use that land, even though it's being cared for and maintained by its new owners. If the rezoning does not occur, is it safe to assume that the village green will also go away? Next I ask, Mr. Galaro has a pretty stellar reputation from what I can see from the previous projects he has. And what I'm kind of concerned is that people still question his motives, and the village is still deliberating over a concept plan that has met the village wishes a few years ago. I also wonder, what else can someone want to know that hasn't already been asked and answered time and time again? That's it.
So right.
Mike Armstrong?
Sorry. I'd like to say just a couple of things in favor of this B4A zoning. I'm Mike Armstrong, 7 North Avenue. I think it's important to look carefully at the comprehensive plan, the village's comprehensive plan that was adopted in January of 2012. The consultants prepared a list of all of the items in that plan to which this B4A zoning conforms. And it's something like 2 pages of bullet items. But I think the central principle of the comprehensive plan that this fits with is called smart growth. And the concept is that you take areas where there already is infrastructure in place, and you put your development, a region puts its development in those areas. And Cold Spring, as it happens, has a great surplus of capacity to process water, to process sewage, to handle garbage. We have surplus capacity, which is, we can probably handle about twice as much as we have in each of those categories. So from a regional planning perspective, this kind of zoning, this zoning fits with the concept of developing where development should go, which is where you have the capacity to handle people, to put people. There were several questions that have arisen regarding whether this project is truly tax positive. And I did look at the EAF document on the analysis. And frankly, I found the analysis very compelling, very simple arithmetic. I don't think it requires some kind of a special fiscal impact study, an independent study. I think the arithmetic is very, very simple and direct. If anything, the tax value, the tax benefit of this project is probably on the order of 2 to 3 times what is actually claimed in the EAF by the developer. And that's because of the very conservative assumptions that the developer made in terms of assessing the costs. The costs are not, are simply the developer projects the costs as if they will increase directly with the increased population. And clearly that will not be the case. We won't be hiring more police because of this project. We won't be hiring more garbage collectors. We won't be hiring more village staff. There'll be a very, very small increase in the village's costs as a result of this project. So I think clearly the numbers tell the story that this is a tax positive development. There were some questions about whether the market value was fairly appraised, that it was somehow overappraised. Our own town appraiser evaluated those numbers. He's a very honest guy. There's no reason why he would say that they're not right, and he said that these numbers are fair numbers. These are reasonable numbers, and I would go with his evaluation. I think to have this kind of density, I think it's appropriate for the village. It's appropriate for the in terms of the comprehensive plan. It's what the comprehensive plan envisioned in terms of mixed uses, in terms of the density, and in terms of even accommodating the future changes in demographics that was alluded to earlier, in terms of the shift to higher proportion of the population being seniors. So I would urge that this B4A zoning be supported.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Laura Lee starts. Shirley Norton.
My name is Shirley Norton. Can you hear me?
No.
Sorry. For me, it's like shouting, you know. My name is Shirley Norton. I live in Cold Spring. I'm a senior. I live in the senior housing by Foodtown. I want to say that I remain supportive of the B4 zoning change. From attending village board meetings and the planning board meetings, I've come to believe that the EAF study and their conclusions
have made it very clear that the Butterfield site is very appropriate for the Butterfield project. I think my interest in the project is because Paul Galero is going, will have a building there that will house house space for a senior center. So that's my interest in the whole thing. So I'm asking the village board to approve this zoning change and move the Butterfield proposal back to the planning board as soon as possible. I live directly across the street from the Butterfield site, and I've been waiting patiently, far too long, with others to see this project underway. We want to see this happen in our lifetime, long before we're in our graves, before I'm in my grave. A proper senior community center is desperately needed for our area. A center similar to the senior center in Mahopac and Pleasant Valley. A place where we can offer computer classes to see, this is all for seniors, gardening workshops, art classes, plans for community garden, exercise, lectures, ballroom dancing, whatever, Right now, we're confined to a very small, stuffy basement room at Chestnut Ridge Apartments. And well, there's a very small space at the American Legion building as well. This is not at all adequate to accommodate and serve the 500 plus seniors that are in our area. So many of you here who are not seniors will eventually become one of us. We have a very capable developer who can provide a facility or a space that we so desperately need. And I think the community needs it as well. I mean, it's not just for us, it's for other community events and projects. I also want to say that I hope that the board does not base their decision on this one meeting here tonight, but the other many meetings that have been held in the past 5 years, or how many years. A large number of seniors are not here tonight. They're not able to be here, but there are a lot of seniors who remain supportive of this project, hoping that we're going to have a senior center. So it's time to make a decision. If not for us, certainly do it for yourselves, for you will someday soon be wearing the title of senior. And then you'll know, I didn't know what it was like for my parents. I mean, I tried to understand, they had Alzheimer's and everything, or, strokes and all that stuff, but now I'm one of them, and now I know. So I'm telling you, even though you can't imagine what it's like, have some mercy and compassion. Okay. So please do base this decision on common sensibility and the proven adequacy of the proposed Butterfield project and the needs of the citizens of the community whom you represent. Thank you very much. Thank you.
May I suggest that we crack that door open? It's really just getting too hot in here.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Aaron Wolf.
Hi, Aaron Wolf from Church Street. I am not yet a senior citizen, but in just a few years I will be, and I will have a son who will be too young to live at Butterfield. But that's that is not my, my main point. First, my neighbor, James Gepner, sent me something to read. He could not make it, and I'm going to read a letter from him. To the Mayor and Village Board, I recently reviewed the financial projections and claims in the developer's EAF application and would like to go over what I found during this review. My analysis shows that the project will generate at least $200,000 less in revenue contributions each year than what is projected in the developer's EAF. This disparity alone causes me to question the reliability of the developer's forecast. In the economic analysis on page 58 of the EAF, the developer assumes that every resident of these units would all continue to earn the equivalent of a full salary while living in the units, even though the occupants would all be of retirement age. The developer's forecast does not seem to account for the use of enhanced star discounts, which, as you can see from condo units now on the tax rolls, can reduce a household school tax payment to zero. The developer's projections do not reflect the loss of tax income to the village if the county should buy or lease one of the commercial buildings. This loss of taxable square footage could reduce tax revenues by more than $90,000 each year. The developer's projections do not show what would occur if the age restrictions on residents were not enforced locally. This is a likely scenario as it is difficult to enforce these age restrictions, and it is easy for a municipality to lapse in this responsibility. My analysis shows that a lack of enforcement could result in an annual loss for the village of $100,000 or more. These are not small issues, and these are not the only shortcomings I found in the developer's calculations. What would give me more confidence in this process is for the developer's tax income projections to be reviewed or verified by an independent financial authority, which is a standard practice that so far Cold Spring feels happy to shrug off. Of course, there is an alternative to conducting an independent financial analysis. It is for the developer to give the village a full guarantee by a creditworthy institution of the tax income currently projected by the developer. For the mayor and the village board to fail to seek either of these two options strikes me as both negligent and a failure to live up to the financial responsibilities you accept once you take office. Thank you, James Gepner, village resident.
Thank you.
And now I have a few comments of my own. At the recent workshop where the B4A zoning amendment was reviewed, a luncheonette was added as an allowable use after the EAF had been completed. So I'm curious if there is a definition of luncheonette that exists in the village code and how it differs from a restaurant, which is not allowed, which is not an allowed use. Without a definition of what a luncheonette is, I think we can just imagine that it's going to be a small restaurant, possibly, serving beer and table service, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but we should know what we're getting. I question though whether a 15-seat restaurant can survive on foot traffic alone, and I think that it would be reasonable to expect such a business to want to cater to the commuter traffic that goes by constantly. This increase in traffic, if it exists, I don't believe was accounted for in the negative declaration for the EAF because the luncheonette was not part of the plan at that time. And finally, because this was added after the EAF was approved, I don't believe that the public had a chance to discuss this with the planning board, so the planning board may not have been aware of the public's views about a luncheonette or other restaurants. And I think to add this last minute change without a review would be irresponsible on the part of the board. The negative declaration declared that we would not need another police officer and that we wouldn't need any infrastructure improvements at all. Now, if we accept the case, we still have to ask how much closer does Butterfield bring us to needing the next officer or the next large infrastructure expenditure. So marathon or perhaps policing required by parking meters could push us over the edge, but we don't know. And I think that we cannot look at Butterfield in a vacuum, and we really need to have a professional independent financial review to account for those possibilities. Finally, the comprehensive plan, I believe, calls for a walkable, bikeable, pedestrian-friendly village with all parts of the village interconnected. But the Butterfield site, as we can, what we can see of it now, shows us nothing but parking and facilities for cars. With 220 new spots, we can imagine a lot of car traffic that's going to affect traffic and walking on 90. It looks like sidewalks are an afterthought, and I can't tell anywhere where there's any bike infrastructure on the plan. If Butterfield residents are not comfortable walking around the village, they will drive to Main Street and further worsen the parking issues that we have.
Is that, you have, I mean, your time is up.
I have one last sentence.
Okay.
Sorry. So before you vote to approve, please understand that these changes contradict what the village has already approved in the comprehensive plan.
Frank Haggerty.
My name is Frank Haggerty. I live at 12 Main Street.
Can you speak up?
My name is Frank Haggerty. I live at 12 Main Street in Cold Spring. I've been in the village for about 5 years. I thank the board for allowing me to comment. I'm going to discuss I'm going to introduce and kind of summarize and paraphrase a document which I have sent to the board by email on my analysis, if you will, or critique, if you will, of the concept, less the zoning per se, but the sub-zoning as it applies to the concept. This is a third version. I've distributed it formally, earlier versions of this, but I've been thinking about this project, and I realize that it takes, due to the scale of the project, it takes a little amount of time to really put things together and really come up with something close to a comprehensive analysis of the project. Even if you decide that you don't agree with everything that is in my analysis or critique, you may find some useful ideas that you may want to, put to work somewhere. Okay, I'm going to jump around this memo. I assume it's going to be available to the public, but it's been distributed to the board.
Can you speak up a little louder?
I'm sorry. I guess I'm very soft-spoken. I'm going to jump around this memo, but I'm going to indicate that I'm not going to cover it entirely, but it has been distributed to the public, so presumably it's available, or I will have a few copies here if somebody wants to read it in its entirety. I want to indicate that there are, I believe, some positive or needful developments that may be pursued specifically, and then I'm going to touch on my concerns with the plan as it is today, as we're seeing it. I'd like to talk about medical services, local medical services. The existing site has a non-used hospital, an existing medical facility. The neighboring location there has a very old house that was originally used as a doctor's facility, doctor's offices, so that there are long-standing continuity with a medical service or medical services being provided at this location of the village. It went into disuse for various economic reasons. Presumably, a hospital is not economic. However, I think we want to consider the history of this site and the fact that there is an ongoing and increasing need for local medical facilities, walk-in clinic, and/or emergency urgent care facility of some kind, and maintain that as a use or a planned use for this location. Failing that, people who have medical needs have to drive outside of the area, have to go outside of the area to their facility, so it's time consuming and costly to do that, maybe for routine medical needs. So I want to urge that we look at that as a number one, continuity, an established need, an established use, maintaining that. I also will summarize 10 points that I'd like to discuss. This is one point was local medical services and to maintain that. Another concept that I'm going to briefly discuss, or just mention really, is the concept of the transit center, a bus depot. We have a train station. People arrive in the area primarily by automobile or by train. The train goes north and south and doesn't connect easily with other locations that people may want to visit. For example, the medical facilities in Fishkill, which would require a train and then a bus connection, or maybe 2 bus connections. So you want to read that in detail, my thought on, which has not been discussed here, of a transit center of some kind. Senior Services Center. We need a senior services center. I don't know why we focus on this site per se. I don't know why we don't already have a senior services center. It's really baffling. I'm agreeing that we need something of that nature. Am I on time?
Yes.
Sure.
We can come back, you can, at the end, yes. Yes.
Ann Cohen. Donna Anderson. Yes. Come on.
Hey. My name is Don. Yes, I am. But not. Okay. On March the 10th, I came when they had a village trustees and planning board meeting here, and I submitted a 10-page petition from seniors of Phillipstown, okay? And this is my copy. I don't know if any of the board members did get a copy of this here, but I just want to make sure that people know that there are well over 100 signatures here, and just because the seniors are not here, they're not forgotten, okay? So I'm just here to be a voice for them. We need to be for a zoning, and that's why I'm here. I've been here for the past 5 years, speaking for the seniors, not the Phillipstown seniors, but the seniors of Phillipstown. There are over 2,000 seniors in the town of Phillipstown, and I think it's time that we do have community services here for more than just the seniors, for everybody. You know, motor vehicle would be wonderful over here. You know, some of that will pay for itself, you know. But we need a larger nutrition center for the seniors. The other one is very small. And we need a new kitchen, which hopefully when we do get a new kitchen, it will be fresh food that our seniors will be getting, instead of trucked in food, reheated food that's been sitting on plates for over 2 hours, where the nutrition is gone as it sits and gets reheated and reheated and reheated. So that's all I have to say, and I hope the trustees will put this back to the planning board and approve the B4A zoning for the Butterfield project.
Thank you.
Amen.
Yeah, do you want to submit the petition into the record?
The village board has this here petition already.
Is it in the record? It is in the record?
Yes, it is, from March the 11th. Thank you. Thank you.
Elizabeth Nitko?
No comment.
Nitko, sorry? No. James Pergamo,
None at this time.
Dar Williams,
No, thank you.
Michael Robinson,
No, thanks.
Joe Patrick,
Joe Patrick of 18 Orchard Street. Two things. First, if somebody could just clarify if there is county services going into these buildings. I know that there's space for them, but as of the firehouse meeting and as of today, no one has said yes or no that there are county services going in here. And actually it's kind of funny because while we were looking at the 3D model, one of the seniors asked us while we were standing around there, she said, "Where is the senior center going?" But we had to tell her that right now there is no commitment as far as we know, but there is a home for it if the county chooses to put it there. So there is no commitment, so I'd like to hear if there is or if there isn't. And then second is, since the village board is not doing an independent financial analysis, are you guys going to do some sort of maybe developers agreement with Mr. Galero that maybe down the road, if we do have infrastructure problems, we need a new police officer, will he be able to help foot the bill for part of these expenses?
thank you. Matt Francisco,
I want to thank the board as well as the plan and the HDRB for their countless hours of work reviewing this application under intense scrutiny from the press, public and local officials. I think we're all lucky to have residents, who live here, who look out for us and our interests as they review these applications. So thank you all for your efforts and the time you take away from your families to do this for us. I was very distressed in an early village board meeting to learn that the village will not be obtaining an independent opinion on the finances of the development. As the mayor explained, he felt that the planning board and the assessor had already undertaken that effort and their opinions were sufficient. I have to say that while I value their opinions, I do not feel they are a replacement for those of a certified municipal financial planner. Further, there's a much larger financial picture well beyond the EAF that should inform any understanding of the financial impacts of this project. Specifically, the village's overall financial picture, such as its means of income, debt structure, bond ratings, pressing capital needs, etc. The EAF really only addresses what the developer calculates to be the tax revenues to the village. The plan also ignores the possibility that the county, a tax-exempt municipality, were to purchase building number 1 and therefore be removed from the tax rolls. Their strong desire for ownership over leasing is well documented in the public record. I can't stress enough how incomplete and insufficient the cursory and isolated financial analysis to date is, and the village takes great risk for all of us in doing so. With respect to the assessor, with all due respect to the members of the board, as well as others spoken, I think folks are not really clear on how an assessor functions within the municipality and what their actual role is. When I met with Brian Kenny 3 weeks ago, he said he couldn't really tell me what data he used to provide the opinion in his 2013 letter to the board. It was very unclear. The record seemed to indicate that he was using the 2013 market analysis that was prepared by GAR. The idea was that he was using the current data from the EAF, so it's not clear to me now. But I do think that that's not really what matters. I think they basically review and comment, but are very careful in their comments, and they very much take a wait and see position. This was made very clear to me in my meeting with Mr. Kenny. So that brings us here tonight. The PB has passed a negative deck on the EAF, so they brought us a plan that will largely represent what we'll get. I think Mr. Barshaw put it best when he said this ship has sailed. Should the BB pass the zoning, the Butterfield development will essentially be the model of the plan that we see tonight. The planning board has ensured that piece, as well as the finances of the project for us all. So the question before this board is, should this ship permanently dock here in Cold Spring? I think the projected $48,000 in tax revenue is a good thing for the village, potentially, but we need to understand what hidden costs might not have presented themselves yet. The largest potential risk in my mind is that of water and sewer infrastructure. Mr. Sari, the planning board, a licensed civil engineer, expressed those same concerns in the February 12-14 planning board meeting. He was addressing the water superintendent's position that the water and wastewater had been demonstrated adequate. He said, and I quote, "We know the plant capacities are adequate, but I still question if the infrastructure between the projects and the plants will not need some changes? What if we are making statements here that will later be proven not to be accurate? I have serious concerns. Mr. Barshaw also addressed this in the informational meeting at the firehouse, and basically summed it up with, if the village as a whole has old infrastructure, well then it has old infrastructure, just as much as it's old infrastructure for your sewage and your neighbor's sewage and everybody else's sewage. So that's not us. So that means it's us. It's the village taxpayers, right, who bear this risk if existing piping from Butterfield to the water, the wastewater treatment plant needs work. We're projected to have that $48,000. So my question to the board, in the absence of an independent financial review, has this board developed a plan on how we will address and pay for this work if it is determined that it's needed? The water main lining cost us over $1 million, so what will the cost of this be? We're still paying for the water main relining, and we'll soon add the wastewater plant work bond debt as well. So if the planning board and assessor are our sources of information for financial planning, can they help us with modeling this risk? Finally, to protect any decisions that are made on this application, I think it would be prudent for the village board to ensure that there are no conflicts on any of its board, including their own. Though I doubt any conflicts exist, I think it would be wise to have all board members disclose any financial interests in the project, including any intent to purchase condominium units or lease space at Butterfield. I am sure there is no issue, but it would certainly reinforce transparency and protect any challenges later to be fully transparent on this matter now. Thanks.
Susan Penny?
Who would think?
Susan Penny, 36 Paulding. I am here to speak on behalf of the members of the Paulding Avenue Neighbors Association, of which I am one. With up to 110 new senior residents and their visitors, plus hundreds of other daily visitors to the offices and businesses at Butterfield, we expect many people will look to take a nice walk on Paulding Avenue. Unfortunately, there is currently no sidewalk on the Butterfield side of Paulding, forcing pedestrians either to walk on the street or to cross to the east side, which is especially dangerous for seniors. Our members believe that to accommodate increased foot traffic from Butterfield, there needs to be a sidewalk on the west side of Paulding Avenue, extending from the partial sidewalk on Lower Paulding to the end of the 9D sidewalk in front of Butterfield. Since the proposed Butterfield complex has created a necessity for a sidewalk to safely accommodate an increase in pedestrian foot traffic, our association believes that the developer should be held responsible and required to install it.
Here, here.
Allison?
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Donald McDonald?
Donald McDonald, 10 B Street, Cold Spring. I want to thank Mr. Galero for the model. Much appreciated. I know it wasn't cheap, but I think it helps a lot in seeing what the project looks like, and I think it shows some positive things, and I think there's some negative things that I think could be improved on, and one of them was I was encouraged when the planning board asked for the possibility to make some of the buildings 3 stories and cut down on some of the impervious surface, or leave the impervious but add more green. And I was a little sad to see it go out in the last firehouse board meeting. I would encourage you to reconsider that for buildings 3, 4, 5, and 6. Basically, they are very large buildings, and I think you can see that when you compare the footprint of those buildings to, you can do it in the model, you can see the footprint of the senior citizen buildings to the senior citizen buildings next door at Chestnut Ridge. They're very large buildings. I understand why that, from the developer, from Mr. Claro's point of view, he would say, look, I'm giving you an acre of open space, 3 residences along Paulding Avenue, all things that take a lot of open space, and he's in a squeeze play with the senior citizen housing. And I think that the 3-story option in those areas, I think even at 10-15% will help that situation for the seniors.
I'm not gonna live there, but, not to say that it wouldn't be great to live there, but it'll be nicer to live there with a little more green space between those buildings. Let's see, I would be concerned about if a municipality, if the county said, we don't wanna lease, we wanna buy, that, as I understand it, the tax revenue would cease on that portion that they bought. And maybe I'm wrong on that, but I would be concerned about that, and I would hope that the trustees would account for that possibility, or see what the implications would be if that happened. The luncheonette that came into it at the firehouse meeting, I understand why somebody might think about having that, but I think that you don't want to undermine the luncheonette type services that we have around Foodtown. And I think also it would encourage traffic, pedestrian traffic between Butterfield and Foodtown, and I think that's something we want to see. It's always a great thing to come into the village and see that open space lawn, and then people walking along the sidewalk. And I think seeing more of that will feel more like our village, more like what Cold Spring is about. If I was a trustee, I would hope that you would vote for the B4A with my comments.
Hi, I'm Kim Connor. I live at 260 East Mountain Road South. I don't live in the village, but I spend a lot of time in the village, and a lot of us, the village affects all of us. Sorry, I'm Kim Connor. I don't live in the village. I live on East Mountain Road. I spend a lot of time in the village. A lot of us who don't live within the village spend a lot of time in the village, and it matters to all of us. I'm really here to remind you all about the Copper Beach and how important it is, and how special it is, and how unusual it is. And according to this drawing here, the edge of the building goes right up to the edge of the tree. Now, I don't know if that's accurate, but I know that these big trees, the roots extend at least as far as the drip line of the tree. And it's been my experience watching at my children's school, where they had 3 of these beautiful big copper beeches. They put in a trap. One of them they had to take out altogether. Another they said, oh, it's fine, it's going to be just on the edge, but it's outside. 3 years later, it's dead. So often what happens is the developer comes in and has the best intentions, but 5 years later, the tree is gone. So if there's any kind of thing that the board can do to, preserve this tree, if making the building higher means it can be pushed back a little bit and the tree has a chance. It's a really special thing in Cold Spring.
Thank you. Ken Cepeda?
Nope.
Nope. Patricia Sheehy?
Good evening. My name is Pat Sheehy. I'm the director of the Putnam County Office for the Aging. And my role is an advocate for the seniors of Putnam County, many of whom could not be here tonight, and many of whom have approached me and asked me to attend this hearing tonight and voice their opinion. I became the director 2 years ago last month, and one of my first trips was here to Cold Spring to the Senior Center, which is at the American Legion Hall. And it was very interesting because when I went in there, it was a St. Patrick's Day party, and I was overwhelmed by the crowd. The one thing I felt is I didn't have to worry about anybody falling because there was no room for them to fall down. And actually, it always comes to mind when I hear about the Butterfield project that there were 3 seniors there that day, and we did talk about the Butterfield project in the hope that we would be able to have a senior center at the Butterfield project, because that was one of the things that our county executive, Mary Ellen Odell, had said to me that was one of the things that we really need to concentrate and look at, developing a new senior center here in Cold Spring. 3 of those seniors who spoke to me that day are no longer with us, so I feel in my heart that, you know, there's a special mission that I have to carry for them and all the other seniors that are quickly coming into our ranks here. And it's interesting to note that this year has been declared the year of the senior, and there's reasons for that. This year, Putnam County has become the fastest growing senior population in New York State, with 1 in every 4 residents of Putnam County being a senior. And 83% of the seniors in Putnam County own their own homes. And Linda and Linda spoke about livable communities and living in place. And one of the real challenges for seniors in Putnam County is that we live in homes that incorporate a great deal of property and sometimes are just not accessible for the handicap conditions that come along with aging. So when we talk about livable communities and I look at this plan, it really does fit what we're looking to develop. And I do believe that many of the citizens of Putnam County who now own their own home will be interested in moving up into the senior project. One of the other interesting things I think we should all know too is that May is Older Americans Month, and we're right on the eve of May, and this project seems to be coming to a very healthy state perhaps of approaching approval. I just think it would be wonderful if we were able to do that in May. However, I also think that we really have a perfect alignment here, and I've heard some questions about will the county come in and operate a senior center, who's going to pay for it, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's a perfect alignment because we have Mr. Galaro who says he will build the center. Then we have a wonderful contribution by the ELs who say that they will outfit the center. And the Office for the Aging, soon to be the Office for Senior Resources, will operate or sustain the program. And I think we've heard a number of comments about the overcrowding at the American Legion Hall and the inadequacy of the facilities because it really is one small room. And we do need a space where our seniors can exercise, where they can, you know, we talk about computer training, but, you know, I just was talking to some people about that. We're going to move away from computer training and really get into mobile device training because pretty soon our computers are going out the door. We're going to be doing iPads and iPods and whatever, tablets. So, you know, the needs are constantly changing, and we need to be able to meet those needs and exercising. And, you know, when you look at the plan here, too, it's a wonderful opportunity for seniors not only to exercise indoor, but outdoor as well. And having the doctor's offices right nearby is also a very wonderful opportunity. So I think that I've pretty much covered the importance of this development to the senior community. And I just want to say that, you know, our goal at the Office for Aging is to keep our seniors out of nursing homes. And the services that we've provided have...
Excuse me, is there a lot left or you?
No, 2 more seconds.
Thank you.
Have on average kept the seniors out of nursing homes for 2.5 years, and that's a savings of approximately $160,000. And the other really important thing is its quality of life issue. A center like this could give our seniors an opportunity to remain healthy and viable members of their own community in their own community. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Stacy Matson-Zubik.
I'm Stacy Matson-Zubik. There's a hyphen between the last 2 names, but at 19 Northern Avenue. And I have a question for the board. If there was ever any discussion or with the developer or with the board on a conservation easement for the gateway Gateway Park area, if that was ever anything that was looked at or discussed for that particular section of the property. Also, I would like to add that in considering the possibility of the swap and trade for the height increase to reduce the footprint, I think it's really important to look at what that height increase does to the view shed to the Highlands. When you enter our village, you know you've arrived in Cold Spring. You have those views across the river. You have the views from Crow's Nest. You have the views to the surrounding highlands around us, and you realize that you've arrived in Cold Spring. It's really part of our community character. It's part of our setting. It's part of our scenic area of statewide significance. And I think it's important to look at that when you're looking at the heights. I know I was looking at that with the construction in the context of what's there now, how much it's going to increase. Are you going to now enter the village and not see some of those ridge lines that we love as we enter into our village? So that's important to look at. Also, I'm just wondering if another question, if the renderings that were in the EAF, how they compare to the rendering that's on the homepage of the developer's website, which is also illustrated on this board up behind Stephanie. So if we could get some clarification on that as well, just the difference. If it was just a difference in illustrating stylistic details or what that you just explain that. I think that's it.
Thank you. Mike Gallagher. Tom Ralston.
Tom Ralston, 10 Grove Court, directly next to the proposed buildings, and I'll be honest with you, myself, Cronin, we're tired of looking at it. It's been ugly for 25 years. And here in Cold Spring, what do? We study and we delay. And we study and we delay. I've never seen so much studying in my life. Oh, hi, John. I didn't see you. So we are study out. Right now, we're studied out. Let's get this thing built. We can talk about the seniors. We can talk about the luncheonettes. I'm in the restaurant business. We can talk about all these other things, and they don't mean a darn thing. What sold me on this project was the day I picked up the newspaper and saw that beautiful color photograph in there that obviously Mr. Galero had made, and it's beautiful. It's an excellent way to enter our beautiful city of Cold Spring. My idea was to put a huge municipal center, something very grand for Cold Spring. But that's not really Cold Spring, that's just me. And you have to make a difference there, you know. But his proposals are beautiful. The beautiful lawn. Stop studying. We don't need any more studies. Let's build the damn thing. 2011, I was a handful of residents, because I go to a lot of board meetings when I'm not in Florida, and there's a handful of residents that were sitting there when he made the initial proposal. And we want to start building this thing in 6 months, he said. 6 months? Are you kidding? In the town of Cold Spring, never in 100 years it'll happen that way. So we studied, and now we're 4 years later, or 3 years later, whatever we are later. And we're still studying. There's more proposals out here to study more of the financials. Who cares? I don't care. Get this thing built and get it built now.
Michael Reisman.
Hi everyone, I'm Michael Reisman. I live on Rock Street in the village, and in a few weeks I'm going to get a tax bill from the village of Cold Spring. I care about what that number is on that tax bill because I have to pay it, and then in a few months I'm going to get an even bigger tax bill from the Haldane School District. I really care about what that number is because that is a much bigger bill. So with that said, I support mixed-use development in general, and in particular at the Butterfield site. However, I have concerns about the fiscal impact analysis contained in the EAF dated January 8, 2014, that's on the village website, that was submitted by the applicant. In short, the EAF's property tax revenue projections appear optimistically high, and the incremental costs may be understated, which could leave village residents exposed to increased taxes in the future. I am also concerned that no independent fiscal impact analysis of the project has been performed, and that the village may be exposing residents to a financial hit should the applicant's projections prove inaccurate. So, significantly, the EAF does not account, in my opinion, for two facts that may dramatically lower the project's tax revenues. Number one, the lower valuation of condo units under the New York real property law, and two, the STAR tax exemptions, which can exempt a substantial amount, up to $60,000 of the full value of a home from school taxes. So what I have done is I have submitted to the village board, I assume it's going to be part of the public record that people can access on the village website, my own analysis of the fiscal impact of the project, and I've done that in an Excel spreadsheet that people can hopefully at some point look at and test and determine if my projections and my analysis is correct. Having done that and using comparable valuation estimates from the village, I respectfully request that the village board review this analysis and explain why it believes that the applicant's fiscal impact estimates are correct and why my analysis is incorrect. I also ask the village board to consider how the village may protect itself if the project's actual revenues are lower and the costs are higher than stated in the EAF. Because the project will undoubtedly be the largest development in the village in decades, I think it's incumbent on the village board to exercise due diligence by conducting a searching analysis of the project's fiscal impact and to consider protective measures before it amends the zoning law. So just briefly, in my analysis, I ran several scenarios to estimate the potential financial gain or loss to the village via the three taxing districts, village, town, and school. And essentially what I came up with was applying the STAR tax rebate and looking at comparable values. The net tax revenue to the three taxing districts I found was more than $200,000 less than the EAF's estimate. Then, using the projection that is actually contained in the EAF as an alternate case projection, but the numbers are actually in the EAF for 8 additional school-age children. I mean, there are, in the EAF, it does consider that the single-family homes will have school-age children. So there's an alternate scenario in the EAF that considers 8 additional students. If that happens, I estimated that the net tax revenue, the net gain accounting for the increased costs, would be only $30,000. And then if there are more than 8 students, let's say up to 16 school-age children in the development at some point, the project would have a negative tax impact. Now, today, thanks to Mary Sari, who I think does a wonderful job as village clerk, I received from Mary a response that, I sent, what I just read you comes from a letter that I sent last week to the village board in connection with this hearing, and I received back a letter that responded to some of what I wrote, which I think was very helpful, and I had a chance to look it over today, thanks to Mary. And all I would say is, because I know I'm probably running out of time, there is reference made in, and I'm sure this will hopefully all go in the public record, there's reference to analysis that Mr. Kenny, who is the town tax assessor, performed last year. It's unclear to me what Mr. Kenny looked at the time, in July of 2013, but Mr. Kenny said, as in other instances that I have been involved with, at this stage, the developer may be the bearer of great tax news for a proposed development to the municipalities, and then when all is said and done, they often file tax certiorari cases against those same property assessment estimates that they quoted to begin with, exclamation point. I would propose that if this development goes through, that they informally resolve in a separate agreement to at least a 5-year freeze on filing any tax case if the final assessments are in line with their proposal. Those are Mr. Kenny's words, not mine. And again, I received that today thanks to Mary, and I assume that's all going to be part of the public record. So I encourage people to look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy Cepeda?
Hi, I would like to thank everyone for taking the time to make sure that this project is accounted for financially. Really, really important. So I really appreciate that fine level of detail. When you sit here long enough and you come up with some other ideas, also besides the trees, which Kim pointed out, I think it's really important to our community that we do consider having native plants included in the project, and I'm happy to donate those should the project go through, which I hope it does. Thank you.
Billy Fields?
It's really warm in here. Billy Fields, I live at 11 Locust Ridge. I'm going to guess you can all hear me. I project well. I've been here since 2006. We drove into Cold Spring on 90 and we said, look at the zombie hospital. Because that's kind of what it looks like. It looks kind of like out of a zombie game. I really want to see it developed, but I also think that it is imperative that you have an independent financial review of the developer's plans. Developers, by their nature, are optimistic because you have to be optimistic to be a developer. Their numbers are going to be optimistic. Your job as the board is to be very pessimistic because you have to protect all of us, and I mean all of us. My mother-in-law is, oh my God, she'd be mad at me right now, 88 years old. She lived in Chestnut for a couple of years. Now she lives in Beacon. We're trying to get her back. She's number 10 on the list. She can't get in. It's been a year. I would love to have more senior housing in town. I'd like to make sure that it doesn't put undue stress on the community. I'd also like to make sure, to Barbara's point, I'm sorry, I know this is a board thing, it has been stated very clearly that there's a senior center and we want a senior center and let's get a senior center. But I'm not a really smart person, but from what I understand, that is not guaranteed for the public at this point. The building that's on that map is for the people that live in the building. I'd like you to clear that up for me, please, tonight. Answer that question unequivocally, yes or no. And if it means that we have to get a senior center put in somehow for the rest of the seniors, awesome, let's work towards that. But let's build it. I agree with, oh, he's gone. He was great. Big guy, nice voice. Please, but we got to do it right financially, and we got to do it right by the seniors, and not say one thing and parse words, because it's not for the community, it's for the people that live in those units. Correct? Yeah. Let's get that clear. Thanks.
Dean Stroke, please. Michael Merkel.
My name is Mike Miracle. I live at 210 Main Street, and this is my first year as a New York taxpayer since I was 17. I want to associate myself with the comments of people who say, this is a great project, but let's make sure that the village doesn't get hit with an unexpected tax bill over the next 10 years. I am a senior citizen. I expect to live another 10, 20 years here in the village, and I don't want to see my taxes skyrocket, surprisingly. If they do, I'm sure I can afford it. But I'm not so sure that a lot of people in the village, particularly people who are younger, who have children, who are here, who are working at the frozen wages that we have been experiencing for the last 5 or 10 years, and who knows how long they'll last. I'm not so sure that everybody else is going to be able to afford it. So I have great sympathy for those who have said that it's been studied to death, but it hasn't been studied to death if we're not 100% sure that the unexpected expenses won't hit us upside the head. So, thank you.
Maria Hardman. I want to go back and ask Catherine Square, do you have anything you would reserve the right to comment? Oh, did you want to?
Yeah, since my name was mentioned, I thought I should say something. Is that right now?
Yes, that's fine. What is your address, just so I can write it down?
64 Paulding Avenue. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see all my neighbors. Thank you for doing this tonight. Let me start out by expressing my preference. I don't want any development at Butterfield. I want the buildings knocked down. I want the asphalt taken up. I want the Grove to be rehabilitated as an environmental center. I want the Village of Cold Spring to pay for the purchase of the property and all the improvements. I will take my burden as a taxpayer if the village does that. Buy the property, let's improve the property, let's improve the building. I'm not going to lobby for it because I'm the only one in the village who thinks so. It's the best thing that could happen to the property. The best things don't always happen. They just don't. Let me tell you what I see when I drive into Cold Spring. I've lived here, by the way, since 1981. I live in Phillipstown. And I'm told I'm a senior citizen. I'll be 64 in July. When I drive into Cold Spring, here's what I see. I see 33 street signs in about 50 feet. I see a hospital that's falling down. I see 3 mini malls and 2 gas stations. Those are the big attractions on Chestnut Street when you drive through. For those of us who live here, there's a saying, familiarity breeds contempt. It also breeds a certain amount of acceptance of things you've been looking at for a long time. Chestnut Street is 70% ugly and 30% pretty. When this development is built, it'll be 50% pretty and 50% ugly. Because there's a lot left to be done on Chestnut Street. We have to look at this in a fresh kind of way. I understand that change is difficult. I understand big buildings are difficult to swallow. But I've also been looking at this property for an awful long time. And it's horrendous. And it's hideous. Kids are starting to get in trouble there. I see it. I watch it. They throw things at my house. The place is becoming a blight, not because it's me. I know what you're thinking. I know what you're thinking. I have no problem with independent evaluations, but I have a different request. My request is, I want a clarification on what are the legal reasons we can say no. Because I've seen a lot of reasons why these buildings shouldn't be built. And I've seen a lot of them online. Some of them target seniors for the sake of targeting seniors. I know people don't think so, but that's what underlies it.